Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with Mike Simmons. Mike, I realize I just said, welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike, but yeah, it's me and you. I'm still giving Mike Connor a lot of credit for not showing up.
You should always give Mike Connor credit. He's even though he's not here, he's here in spirit.
That's right. He's with us every episode. He's that important.
Every episode.
One thing I want to talk about this episode, Mike, is this idea. While you and I are both content creators, you put out a podcast, you share other people's stuff on social media, you share the stuff you create. And I'm wondering, from your point of view, where's the line between creating content and curating content? And should we do a blend of both?
I don't know. Interesting, idea and thought. I don't know that there's a line, or at least if there is a line, I've not discovered it. Yeah, I think curation of content is more important than creation of content today, primarily because there's so much great content that's out there. Now, I say that at the same time as keeping in mind that we're recording a podcast that's going to go live in a couple of weeks and will be out there in the marketplace. And hopefully people find the content that we're creating at this point in time is valuable and insightful and something they want to share with others. And maybe at some point, somebody curates a list of resources that includes this content that we're creating. So I guess it's all this cycle that kind of goes back in different perspective. And when we create content from a Catalyst Sale perspective, or I share general thoughts in the podcast or other areas where I've had the opportunity to speak, all of that content is influenced by some either experience that I've had or something that I've read or something that I've watched or something that I've heard. And my spin on it, my perspective is a combination of, is taking all of those ideas and concepts and kind of putting them back out in the marketplace in the way that I interpret them. And I don't know if that's good or it's bad, but I guess that's the creative side of creating by reusing other people's content and not just spitting it back out, but adding something to it, adding another layer to it based on personal experience.
Yeah, I think that this does go both ways, because if you have to rely completely on the content you create, you are not possibly delivering your audience everything that they need. But also, if you rely completely on content that you create, if you rely completely on content that you curate, then you're holding back from your audience and not giving them your thoughts and insights. And so I think there isn't probably a line, this is exactly what you should do, but I do see where it could and should be a blend of content that you create and then other people's stuff that you're presenting to your audience. And maybe with that, you put your own take on it or your own opinions to it.
Yeah, agreed. And like one of my favorite places to curate content, or my favorite content curation mechanisms or tools, is Twitter. And I know some people roll their eyes and they're like, okay, Twitter, there's not a lot of stuff that goes on there. It's people, sending pictures of what they're eating or bashing whoever's in the news or trying to self-promote. There's a lot of noise in Twitter. But if you take the time to follow the right group of people in Twitter, manage your network effectively, you can create a content curation machine that works really well for yourself. So I know that if I've got a couple of minutes, whether it's in between meetings or I'm just looking for a break, mind break, or I'm standing in line at the grocery store, I will pick up my phone. One of the first apps I go to is Twitter. It's not the first app. The first place I go is Chrome, and I look at the Jets blog just to see what's new about the Jets. But that's an illness. And then what I'll do is I'll go into Twitter and I'll do just, a couple of scrolls. I won't get into this endless loop of scrolling, which is, can become a bit addicting, but I will maybe scroll 3 times and I'll go through and I'll usually find something interesting that somebody has put out there. And if I don't find anything interesting, I just move on. And if I do, I click on the link and I take a look at whatever it is that they've posted. And for those listening, if you ever see anything from me on Twitter, it's Simmons_M. That is me tweeting at that point in time. So you'll know where I'm at. It's whether I'm either in front of the grill, I'm watching the Jets play, I'm watching the Islanders play, I'm interacting with people who are engaging with us related to the podcast, or other people who are talking about sales or learning related items. And I'm starting to get more involved in some of these Twitter chats that are going on, which is another way to curate a great list of people. So Learn Chat, Guild Chat, Next Chat, which is the one for the society for SHRM. There's a podcast chat out there that's put on by the More Than Hashtags folks. These are great ways to where through these chats, they're able to curate a list of resources, and those resources ideally are live people who are interacting with the chat environment.
I like where you've taken this. This isn't where I thought it would go when I started this conversation, but you've basically told us you can use Twitter to present to yourself a curation of relevant content and people. And I really like that because, as you said, a lot of people say there's too much noise in Twitter and it's all people promoting themselves or just links to articles, which is very helpful sometimes, but there's a lot of it. So let's look at that a little deeper, how you use Twitter to curate content strictly for yourself. Now, I was taking the approach as curating for your audience, but you've managed to set it up where you can show up at Twitter and get the most out of it because of taking place in chats or creating lists. Can you give us some more ideas on how you use Twitter so when you show up, you're not just lost in a sea of noise and self-promotion, that you're actually digging in and seeing what you want to see?
So there's a couple of different things that you can do. One, be really careful about who you follow. And I'm still in that realm of I follow more people than follow me. Hopefully I will, that will shift at some point in time, but be really careful about who you follow. There are some tools that you can use and ways that you can create lists within Twitter to organize that a little bit better. I don't do that. I'm more interested. I'm less interested in doing the work to organize my network by specific categories. So I'm less interested in doing the work to organize them in specific categories than I am in just kind of getting an idea of what's being communicated out in the general space, so that I find content through that's more, I guess, serendipitous, if that's a word. I think I'm using that word right. But it's less about, hey, I want to go in there and find the latest information about sales, or the latest information about marketing, or the latest information about learning. If I want to do that, I'll go out there and I'll do some searches. I'll target some individual people. I'll search for them by name inside Twitter, or search for specific hashtags inside Twitter. But for my general stream, what I do is I follow people who I've found interesting, who either they've communicated with me at some point in time, I've communicated with them, I've seen things that they've put out in the marketplace, and at one point in time, they sparked my interest around something. If they've done it once, I expect that at some point in the future, they'll do it again, and I just add them to my list of people that I'm following. So that's one piece. The other thing that you can do, and we talked a little bit about search there, but you can search specific hashtags that you're interested in. So whenever we post the podcast, we will post to hashtag podcast to try to get some traction around podcast. We will do hashtag sales to try to get some recognition around sales. Depending on the topic, it might be hashtag negotiation or hashtag whatever. And I feel like I'm saying hashtag over and over again and being a bit redundant. But if you find those topics that you're interested in, just do a common search for the hashtag and see who's communicating. And then the other place that I like to use it is when it comes to conferences. So being able to follow the back channel on conferences. And Jody, you were at a conference with Jennifer McClure and Mike Kim and a couple of other folks earlier this year. And I was able to watch the hashtag associated with that to see some of the slides that were being presented at that conference. And that was really cool to be able to kind of lurk or stalk the conference in the background and get a sense for the themes and ideas that were being discussed, and even interact with some of the people that were there without being there physically.
Yes, that is an interesting way to do that. And it's so fun to be able to participate in a conference that way when you're not even there. Sometimes, though, I'll admit, Mike, doing that gives me a little, makes me feel like I'm missing out. If it looks too much fun or there's some people I really wish I could have met there, I will be following the hashtag and then start thinking, oh man, I wish I was there with Mike Simmons. So that does happen.
It's kind
to
of
me
interesting,
sometimes.
Jody. We're recording on a new in a new utility right now, and I'm looking at the graphical representation of your voice, and they're like perfect blocks. And mine go up and down and rise, and it just brings me to a story of something we were talking about before we went live. I'd gotten some feedback about standing closer to the microphone, and finally realized I could actually move the microphone closer to me. And hopefully things are getting a little bit better for the audience, but yeah, it does. You can feel like you're missing out on those in those conferences, but you can also use it as a way to determine, is this the type of conference you want to go to in the future? Who are some of the people that are participating in that conference? Should I be following them? Should I engage with them? Are there other things that we should be doing together? Should I connect with them on LinkedIn? Should I connect with them on Facebook? Should I follow them on Instagram? I mean, just because following those conferences creates an opportunity to be so much more engaged with an audience that you wouldn't have been able to access had you either not gone to the conference or had you just stayed inside your office, or were these tools not available to us?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Well, I want to mention one more way that I use Twitter to curate, and that is lists. I don't know how much you use those, Mike, but I will put a list aside that, let's say I just have one for sales. Well, I'll be actually honest. I've never admitted this, but I like to keep up with the NHL. I don't watch many games. Sometimes I'll listen to the St. Louis Blues games on the radio or through the app while I go out for a walk. But I just like to keep an eye on what's going on. But I don't want to follow on Twitter a whole bunch of hockey related people. So I just create a list, and then whenever I'm in the mood and that's all I want to see, then I will go into the hockey list and scroll through and look at things. And that way hockey doesn't fill my Twitter feed. And I sometimes will do that for other things, or even a geographic region. I live in a small town. If I want to see what's going on, I just select people or businesses, organizations in a Port Townsend list. And then I can just go in and see what's going on. So sometimes lists are a way that you can get specific curation without adding a whole bunch of noise to your Twitter feed. And so I have liked doing that, even though I don't do it extensively anymore. It's worked for me really well when I do it.
And I what this does is it reminds me that there's functionality inside Twitter that I could be using better. And I do not use lists well enough. So that is something, I'll take that as some feedback today and something to take action on and start playing around with lists. It'd be great to hear from the audience how they use tools like this and how they curate resources for their customer base, how they curate resources for their network, and what curated resources they like to follow. Be really interesting to hear that. I do want to talk a little bit about creation. On the creation side, Jody, you are involved in a number of different podcasts. What are your thoughts on this, on continuing to create or push more content out there? What, for people like us who are, Mike and I, who are creating this podcast, and some of the guests that we've had on who are sharing their content, where do you see things going on the creation side as things go forward?
Well, I have a couple ideas on that. First, I think it's very important to be consistent. So if you do have a podcast like Catalyst Sale, it's very important to show up every week, because there are people expecting you to be there. It's like meeting someone at a coffee shop. They expect you to show up every Tuesday at a certain time so they can hang out with you. And if you don't, that's kind of disappointing. And if you don't show up enough, they'll just find someone else to replace you. So in that aspect, I think creation is really important once you got people in the mind that you're going to create something new for them. And with podcasts, you're basically having a conversation with people, and you've promised that to people, and you should show up and have that conversation. So that's one idea. The other is, if you're just sharing other people's stuff, then yes, it is very helpful, but it doesn't do very much to let people know what your thoughts are and that you're a leader and you really know what you're talking about. So that's really important in content creation. And something else that I have learned recently is the value of sharing and promoting your older content. You created it, it was valuable enough for you to create once. So don't just leave it there. Keep letting people know that it's out there because it could be very helpful to them. And what we see, we see this with Catalyst Sale. I see this on other shows that I work on, is maybe they discover you on episode 62 and say, oh my goodness, I love Mike Simmons. Catalyst Sale is a great show. And if you've consistently shown up and created if you're on episode 62, let's say that's 62 weeks in a row, they have a lot of new to them content to go back and listen to. And so I think content creation is very important for somebody that wants to be a thought leader, wants to have a brand based on their personality, because podcasting in particular is personality marketing about as good as you can get. Then if you blog or have a YouTube channel, it's the same sort of thing, that you're showing up to create content to help people, to entertain people. And really, even if you don't say this to your audience, you are positioning yourself as an authority, somebody that really knows what they're talking about. And the only way you're going to get to that level is to create your own content.
Great insight. And, as you were going through it, I hear thought leader, and that's what we want to stay away from. I mean, we don't want to be thought leaders. We don't want to be gurus. We don't want to be that in that grouping or that category inside the sales profession. What we do is we share information about what works in sales based on our experience as practitioners. And there are a lot of thought leaders that are out there who that's all they are, is they just continue to spew information out. So that's an edge that we've tried to be very careful about crossing and not falling into the guru thought leader category, yet continue to put out good content. How do you gauge that? How do you test whether or not that's who you are and that's what you are, and if you're actually executing against that?
Well, you can call it what you want, Mike. You can say I'm not a thought leader, and that's fine to say that. But if somebody turns to you for insight, turns to you to be their mentor, that's what you are. You use your thoughts to help lead conversation, to help lead actions. So you can call it something else because you don't like what people or even yourself think when you hear the term thought leader, but that's what you are if you're putting your thoughts out there for other people to entertain them, to lead them, to help them think about things, learn new things. So that is my thought, that you can't hide from it, Mike, that's what you are. And even if you didn't have a podcast, but you helped people around your office learn new things, which really is what your podcast is. You're teaching a wider audience about the same things you would teach somebody on your staff. So you really can't escape it. You are a mentor, you're a thought leader, you're leading people. You just choose to use a different title for it.
Yep. So I guess I agree with you. I guess it's one of those things. It's no matter what you call it, it kind of is that thing that it is. So yeah, what we're trying to do with something like this is help the signal shine beyond the general noise that's out there, where people talk about silver bullets and talk about quick hits and talk about quick fixes. So we're trying to go through that. What I'd like to just see from the audience is, or are some ideas on what additional content or additional topics you'd like to hear us discuss more often. And as those come through, either I'll be on the podcast or we'll bring Connor back on the podcast, depending on expertise and experience and message that we want to share. And we just look forward to a really exciting 2018, continued growth within the podcast. I want to thank everybody for listening to it. I want to thank you for sharing it with others. That's how this medium continues to grow. That's how people find out about it, is when you recommend to others. So please continue to do that. And if you add us to your list of thought leaders, thank you.
Well, that's a great tie-in, Mike. I almost feel like you have consented to that you just might fall in that category.
Maybe.
but I won't press you for an answer on that. So with that, though, we talked about past episodes. If you want more Catalyst Sale podcast, you can find it on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. We're showing up in all the places podcasts should, or you can find the whole catalog of back episodes also on our website, catalystsale.com. So thank you so much, Mike, and thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast.